More now on Bernard Madoff. He's jailed. His bail has been revoked. He'll be sentenced June 16th and could get 150 years in prison. What will life be like in the big house for him? Let's ask someone who's been there and is now helping white-collar offenders prepare for life behind bars. Larry Levine served 9 years in prison, some of that at the famed Club Fed. That's the Nellis Federal Prison Camp outside of Las Vegas. He was convicted of securities fraud and drug trafficking. He's now founder and director of Wall Street Prison Consultants. He comes to us from Los Angeles. Mr. Levine, welcome to Bloomberg News.
Good morning. Glad to be here with you.
Sir, first, what can you tell us your thoughts on what happened to Bernard Madoff in court today? Was that expected?
I actually thought he was going to stay out on bond. I guess the mainstream public thought he was going to be taken in. I believe that the prosecutor still needs him, or needs his cooperation, in order to locate other conspirators in his crime, and he would be much more apt to cooperate if he was sitting in his penthouse than in a little tiny cell in isolation at MCC or MDC.
Mr.
I
Levine,
believe
could I
he
ask,
may still get bond.
Could I ask you quickly in about 20 seconds, do you think that cooperation by Mr. Madoff is forthcoming?
I believe that it is. He's going to want to save his families from being incarcerated. He didn't commit this crime on his own. Everyone knows that. And they're going to go after his wife, probably his sons, his brother, whoever, as a co-conspirator. So if Bernie cooperates, I've seen this happen a lot of times, they will be more lenient with the family member, or they will waive charges against the family member altogether.
And Mr. Levine, if you don't mind, we're going to keep you here through the break, and we'll get back to you on the other side of the break. Larry Levine joining us.
And as we head to a break, everybody, Bernard Madoff has been transferred to that Manhattan Correctional Center. That's the latest. Back in 2. All right, everybody, we're back at 11:39. Let's get you the latest on that hearing down in Lower Manhattan. Bernard Madoff has admitted that he was the mastermind behind the Ponzi scheme. He pleaded guilty. The judge accepted his plea, and he is being taken to the Manhattan Correctional Center. The judge, in his decision, said he could not go back to his penthouse, but he had to go back, or had to go to prison coming off of that hearing. So that is the latest. Sentencing, though, is coming up on June 16th, so that's really kind of the next focal point, if you will, in this matter with Bernard Madoff. So we do want to get back to our guests. Let's bring them in, if we may. David Berg, he's a lawyer. He's tried all kinds of cases, civil and criminal cases. Also with us is Larry Levine of Wall Street Prison Consultants. He's a former convict, but he's also now helping people, preparing them, if you will, get to jail. Larry, I want to start with you, if we may, because from what I understand, you don't think Bernard Madoff's going to do any kind of jail time. You really believe that?
I really believe that something may happen down the road. They need his cooperation. He didn't commit this caper on his own. He's got co-conspirators, whether they're charged or uncharged yet. It's going to come out. You don't hide $50 billion. There's people overseas in Europe, international bankers and such, that they know where the money is. And you can bet that these other countries, as well as the U.S., the long arm of the U.S. law, they're going to want to prosecute. They need Bernie's help to get these people. I see Bernie bouncing all over Europe, cooperating with foreign authorities. And it will really come down to who's going to incarcerate Bernie, where is he going to be incarcerated at, and protecting him, because as far as I'm concerned, he's a marked man. These international bankers, they got a long reach, too, and they're going to put a hit out on Bernie.
Larry, hold on a second.
I would be surprised if he made it through the end of the year without a bullet in his head.
Wow, that's pretty strong. David, I want to bring in, because you've worked with all kinds of cases, including a lot of white-collar crime. What do you say to that?
Well, that was a lot said. But my thought is that Madoff still has the opportunity to cooperate with the government. I don't think he'll be waltzing around Europe. I disagree with that, because he's left a paper trail, a massive paper trail that they're going to be able to follow. What he did here, and I think is probably a miscalculation, was an attempt to protect his family, which, you know, I guess that's the only commendable thing about this guy.
But can they figure out that paper trail without his cooperation?
No, but he can absolutely help him from his jail cell.
But will he be less cooperative?
He's going to be much less cooperative.
Mr. Levine, you think, why do you say that?
I've been inside of the, well, let's say Metropolitan Detention Center, L.A. I know what a cell is like at MDC. You're locked up in a little tiny room. There's no bars. There's a wooden door with a window. I believe it's like that in New York also. You're bored. You have nothing to do. All you're going to do is sleep. Bernie's going to say, screw you. I'm not doing anything. He knows he's going to do a lot of time. But he's going to tell them, you want my cooperation. I want out of the cell. I want to go home.
David,
he knows he's going to be locked up forever.
David, he brings up a good point.
They need his help, whether there is a paper trail or not. Okay?
What happens
There's
here?
There's loose ends. They need Bernie's help.
Larry, hold on a second.
Excuse me, Mr. Levine. The real power that the prosecutor has, and prosecutors have more power in their briefcases than anybody with a loaded weapon, is to indict his wife.
True.
And they can do that right now with what they have already. It's exactly what happened to Andy Fastow with when they indicted his wife in Houston on a...
Leah.
Thank you very much. I know the Fastows, and I probably... This is like my children finishing sentences.
You do know the Fastows, correct?
I do, and not well, but I know that they indicted Leah. That put huge pressure on Andy Fastow, and that's ultimately what will cripple Bernard Madoff.
So they'll use the family as leverage?
Oh, sure. Family as leverage.
Absolutely. Wow.
You know, Larry, I want to bring in, because you've done prison time, I mean, tell me what it's going to be like for Mr. Madoff. Is he going to be a popular guy or not so much?
People are going to hate Bernie. You've got the guards, the correctional officers, first of all. They've got all their money tied up in pension funds. Those pension funds are tanking right now, so they may have to work longer than they had originally planned. Now, let's take a look at the inmates whose families are losing their homes, losing their jobs. Not to mention, you have family members that are sending money into the inmates so they can purchase hygiene items and other things at the inmate store. Well, that money trail's dried up now, and they're going to look at Bernie for this. Bernie's going to be, let's say he's a marked man on the inside. He's just like a child molester. He's not going to have any friends.
Mr. Levine, let's let Mr. Berg get back in. Yeah.
He's probably right, but this brings up a deeper point. And
we got 20 seconds before we have to take a break.
The problem is in these kinds of fiascos is that we fasten blame on one person, which we should. Bernard Madoff is what he's done is inexcusable.
But he's available.
But we ought to look at ourselves. Ever since John Law, we fail to look at ourselves and our gullibility at times like this.
It's a really good point. All right, we're talking with David Berg and Larry Levine, everybody. We're talking about Bernard Madoff.
And we're rejoined again by David Berg. He's an attorney partner in Berg and Androffi, and also from Los Angeles, Larry Levine. He's a former federal inmate and founder and director of Wall Street Prison Consultants, and we're discussing the Bernard Madoff case. Mr. Madoff on his way to Manhattan Correctional Center at this hour. Federal Judge Denny Chin sending Madoff to jail after Madoff pleaded guilty to the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Mr. Berg, let's get started with you. Accommodations, for lack of a better term. He's going to jail. What's it going to be like?
It's going to be like jail. Minimum security prisons are still prisons. There's no such thing, as Mr. Levine will tell you, there's no such thing as a country club.
There's no more Club Fed. Club Fed's a thing of the past.
Well, what
Club
happened?
Fed is dead.
It's dead.
Club Fed is dead.
Is that
and the only penthouse Bernie's looking
outrage?
at... the only penthouse Bernie's going to be looking at is an upper bunk.
Is that because of outrage over accommodations? You know, back in the day, you see these stories, you hear prisoners, they have cable, they have weights, they can basically roam freely. Has that been due in part to public outrage?
You still have cable. Okay, let's back up. You still have cable, you still have weights. There is a ratio of staff to inmates in a minimum security that's very low. As you go up into the higher custody levels, there's a higher ratio of staff to inmates. Now, you have people that are outraged. Well, they have cable television. They have this. They have that. What the public doesn't realize, those are electronic babysitters.
Mr. Levine.
You need to keep the inmates busy doing something to prevent them from fighting and committing crimes and disobeying institutional policy.
Could I interrupt a second?
Larry, hold on a second. Larry, hold on. David, go ahead.
The question I wanted to pose to you is whether or not there's any access to internet in any of these minimum security prisons.
Yes, there is.
Now, see, that is
not going to minimum.
Mr. Levine,
just
1 second,
based
please.
on his sentence, the dude's not going to minimum.
Maybe if you took off your glasses, you could hear better. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The issue with Bernie Madoff and the reason he's in the penitentiary today is he's so manipulative on the internet. He's so good at what he's doing. And I think probably one of the things the judge considered in deciding whether to put him in the jail lockup today was whether he would be able to continue to manipulate his accounts with his computer at home. I would think that, and that's the first thing. The second thing is the law will treat Bernard Madoff better than he treated his victims. And we do not put people in lockups and in irons anymore, and put them in irons and throw away the key. But what we try to do is maintain some sense of civility or civilization about what we do. And that's why these, while these prisons have been, some of the privileges have been taken away because of public outrage, still, these people eat 3 squares a day and they have some productive work that can be done.
Mr. Levine, we'll give you 20 seconds, let you get the last word.
They need to keep the inmates busy. They need to keep the inmates out of trouble. Bernie's going to have a hard ride. The only way he's getting out is in a box. There's no more federal parole. And Bernie is going to be a marked man on the inside. Everybody's going to hate him. And I'm sure wherever he's going to go, the senior staff at the institution is going to tell them, Bernie's off limits, leave Bernie alone. Because the whole world is watching. And if anything happens to Bernie, it's going to rest solely on the warden of whatever institution he goes to.
All right, gentlemen, I think we have to take another break here, but we're going to bring you both back, Larry Levine and also David Berg. So sit tight. We're having an interesting conversation, to say the least, about what's going on with Bernard Madoff. Today, as you know, he did plead guilty. The judge accepted his plea, and he's been sent to a correctional facility in Lower Manhattan, everyone. So he's not going back to his penthouse apartment on this Thursday. Taking a break. We're back. We continue our discussion in a moment.
And Larry Levine saying that Club Fed is dead. We're staying with Larry Levine in Los Angeles and David Berg here in our New York studio. Mr. Berg, let me begin with you. You were talking to us during the break. There are some other considerations here in the Madoff case. What specifically concerns you?
Well, what happens next is the forfeiture proceedings.
Absolutely.
And as I mentioned, the law will treat Mr. Madoff better than he treated his victims. The law has a cutoff of 10 years back. There are some theories that would allow the government to go even further back to get this $65 million they want to keep and the penthouse apartment. Enterprise. But they're
Go ahead, you finish, David.
But it's like being with my wife. I can finish the sentence, Larry. The fact of the matter is that
I've been schooling the lawyers for years. It's okay.
Hold on a second, please.
They have a way of going back, absolutely, to go back even further to try to get all of his assets.
And what about Ruth Madoff's assets, or so-called assets?
Well, they're going to try to prove that they were commingled. The fact of the matter is that when all the publicity dies down, they are probably going to be able to hold on to some of their assets.
Okay.
It sounded like Mr. Levine was making a suggestion of a RICO statute.
Yes.
Or did I hear you
Well, it
incorrectly?
allows them to go back outside the statute of limitations if they show there's a continuing criminal enterprise. It actually breaks the statute of limitations. You can go back to day one and move forward.
All right, so Larry, what you do professionally, from what I understand, is you actually consult people who are going into prison, correct?
I help people make the transition.
All right, so what would be your advice to Mr. Madoff at this point? If you were sitting down with him today or in a week, what would you tell him?
I would tell him that when he gets on the inside, he needs to keep his mouth shut, his ears open, do not become confrontational with anyone, and show the ultimate amount of respect. And that's just like I would tell anyone. Prisons are tense places. You don't think he might actually be helpful for some clients, that he might be kind of, I hate to say this, a financial advisor, or do you think not even going to happen? Well, let's put it like this. I was locked up with a guy that had an $800 million assessment against him from the SEC. This guy held classes on stock trading and economics that all the inmates attended, even the staff attended his classes.
Gotta love it.
So, I mean, it could happen.
All right. Hey, Larry, hold on. Listen, thank you. And David, I want to give you 20 seconds left. So again, it's the forfeiture of assets. What's next here that we also got to watch in terms of following this case?
Obviously, the next big move will be the sentencing, which will probably get postponed while Mr. Madoff cooperates to the extent he can while taking care of his family.
All right, lot to track and very interesting. Larry, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today. David, also great to have you here. You guys, very interesting conversation from both of you. All right, 11:57. Yep.